Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Nork, St Paul's. We're part of, our parish is Nork with Burheath, so we have another church up the hill in Burheath, St Mary's. They're still on a gas boiler at the moment, but we have plans to change that at some point. So it's great to see so many of you here to show off our new heating system. Feel free to take your coats off because this is the warmest we've ever felt the church to be. So we're very pleased with the result. And thank you to Martin Carr for organising this from the diocese. And we've also got Steve Collins here, who was from the diocese. I believe you're now part of Central Church of England Net Zero team. And we also have here today helping me Morna, who's doing the teas, and she's made some cakes and some biscuits, and Michelle, who's our operations manager. She was very much involved with this project, and she may be answering some questions later. Shall we just begin with a prayer? Creator God, thank you for the beauty and the wonder of the world that you made. Help us to be good stewards of your creation, to live with compassion and to act with courage. May our care for your earth reflect our love for you and for our neighbours. And we thank you, Lord, for the enthusiasm of those willing to take the net zero mission forward. Give them encouragement, and thank you for all those that support this in the diocese and the Church of England. Amen. So I'm George Drewitt, I'm church warden here. I wear many hats because I'm also DAC technical advisor for Net Zero. As I mentioned, Michelle Cahill is our operations manager here, and she was very much organised this project. So the next slide, so the challenge that we had, so we're a 1930s church. I remember when I was little, we used to live in a house that was over 100 years old, and that seemed ancient at that time. But actually, this is quite a young church, 1930s, it's nearly 100 years old. But of course, there's so many, wonderful different buildings in the church estate. They're all different. And although the technologies are similar, there's every church will have a different system that would be suitable for it. There's no one size fits all when it comes to heating. And obviously heating is the biggest energy consumption for any church building. And so it really is the focus for net zero. And basically we need to remove our fossil fuel boilers and use an electric system. So that's the challenge, and we had a oil-fired boiler. We had a tank out there. We had a boiler room out there, chugging away, burning lots and lots of oil, and it never got this hot. It never got this warm. If we were lucky, probably 17 degrees on a mild day, perhaps. So the heating never really performed that well, and we used a lot of energy, and obviously it was dirty energy. And we were among the top 20% of diocesan emitters. It did mean that we were eligible for a free energy audit, which Martin put us in touch with, and we took that up. And what it also meant was that once we had done that, we were also eligible for a £3,000 grant that we could spend on net zero. So it came as a surprise to us when the boiler broke down. We did have a net zero plan, but obviously the challenge that most churches have is that it's an expensive undertaking. So we hadn't planned to replace the boiler as quick as we needed to. So we were without a boiler, and we had to quickly come up with a solution. Initially, as you can see in the photo there, we had this kerosene heater. We use these on building sites and marquees. They're actually really effective, and if it wasn't itself a fossil fuel, I'd recommend these for any church, because it was brilliant. So that was our temporary system for a while, and it was probably around about this time last year that we were having to seriously take this challenge on. So, next slide, please, Michelle. So we led this project ourselves. So with my skills as, DAC technical advisor, but I'm also a consultant and director for a building services company. So this is sort of what I do as a day job, not with church buildings, but I do have some knowledge there, which was really helpful. Martin Carr was very supportive, helping us look into different grants. We had our architect involved. And also Greener Edge, who came and did the energy audit for us to get that £3,000. So I designed this myself. Haven't done many infrared heating designs before, and I think we're one of the first. I don't know of many other churches in Guildford Diocese that has infrared. So as I was going around advising other churches with their heating systems and net zero, everyone was saying, "Oh, I'd like to come and see your system when it's complete." And I was a little worried there that will it actually work, because the theory was there, but we hadn't actually seen it in action. But we are very pleased with the result. So first step was to do a heating options appraisal. We decided on infrared heating, but there are lots of other options available. We thought about just replacing the existing radiators for just electric convective heaters, which would have still needed a 3-phase power supply, but it would have given us, it would have worked as a convective system, which would have performed similar to our old heating system. So we thought, well, it's just going to use a lot more energy, use a lot more electricity, cost us a lot of money, and not actually perform any better than what we're used to. We considered air source heat pumps. You could use air-to-air air source heat pumps, which is like air conditioning systems, where you have an external outdoor unit, which is a refrigerant condenser, and then inside fan coil units, like you would have in an office. That would have performed, I think, quite well, but it was quite a high cost to install. So it was a good option, but when we compared the cost, it wasn't one that we went with. Air source heat pump, air to water, was an option where we would put an air source heat pump in outside and connect it to our existing wet heating system. So we would retain our radiators, we'd retain our pipework, but we would put an air source heat pump in, and we decided not to go for that because, again, the capital cost was very high, and also, again, it would have performed in the same way as our old system would have done. So we just thought it's a lot of money for getting quite a poor system. Direct electric boiler was another option, where again we could reuse the existing pipework. It was the cheapest option, but it would have cost us a lot of money to run, so we decided not to go for that. Ground source heat pump is again same sort of technology, refrigerant technology, like air source heat pumps. I mean, the advantage of air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, is they use electricity, but because they're taking energy out of the air and they're using the refrigerant cycle to convert the energy, you get a coefficient of performance, which is an efficiency which is greater than 100%. So 3 to 4 times the energy that you consume is thrown out as heat. So it's a much cheaper electric heating method, but they generally cost quite a lot more to install. Ground source would have worked in exactly the same way, but you can either put a ground loop in, which would involve trenches or boreholes. So it's quite a lot of sort of civil works, which we didn't really want to do, and it would have been very expensive. Potential, we could have looked at a hybrid heat pump and an oil boiler, but because that wasn't going to be net zero compliant, we wouldn't have been able to get that through the faculty. And obviously, oil boiler would have been the best option. It would have probably cost us 10,000 to replace, but we wouldn't have been able to get that agreed with faculty. We considered underfloor heating. Underfloor heating works very well with air source heat pumps because it operates at a lower temperature, lower system temperature. So it matches air source heat pumps quite well. But again, very high cost to do that. So when we'd put all the pros and cons together, and the fact that with this building, one thing with having a building that's built in the 1930s is we don't have any heritage issues to consider. So infrared heaters that we have here, it wasn't an issue in terms of how they would look and how we would get cables to them. So infrared technology, I mean, infrared is everywhere. The old radiators are infrared. They're radiant heaters. The way these work differently is that they operate at a very high temperature, so hundreds of degrees C, and it's just throwing the heat out and directing it at people. That's why you can feel the heat coming off them, because they're so hot. And so they're far infrared technology, which means you can't see any light coming out of them. But because they're so hot, you can feel them. You can feel the radiant heat. It's no different to a radiator that works off an oil boiler system. That still works with infrared, but it's a much lower temperature. So the technology is different because this is radiant heat that is directly heating, and anything that it hits, the objects, the chairs, the walls, the people. So you can feel that heat straight away. Whereas the old radiators were convective systems, so it heats the air slowly, and then gradually the air heats up, and then you have convection cycles, and it gradually heats all of the air in the space. Infrared heaters will still do that. You will still get convection with infrared heaters, and it probably will take just as long to heat the whole air volume in this space. But you feel the heating effect a lot quicker. And we can turn this on half an hour before service, and you will come in and feel warm. The background temperature may still be 15, 16 degrees, but the heat you feel is, directly from the heaters. But they will gradually heat the space, and after a couple of hours, we have Nest controllers, and we have got various zones. And when the background temperature reaches sort of 19, 20 degrees, it will shut off that zone. So convection still works, and you still heat the space, but it's just that by having that radiant heat, you're feeling the effect immediately. Yes? Yes. We informed the insurers of what we were doing. They didn't have any comments or objection, but ultimately with anything, as long as you follow the manufacturer's instructions, then it's not really a problem, because they're up there, they're high, no one can touch them, so no one's going to get burnt. If you had an object immediately in front of it, then obviously that would be a fire risk. But with all we've got in front of those heaters is air and space, so there's enough to dissipate. I got up there to one of our heaters over there. We had to take it down. I've got a replacement for it, but when I was up there on the tower, it was really warm, but it wasn't burning hot. If I was to touch the heater, it would burn me. But as long as you install it so that the space is as per manufacturer's instructions, you're okay. Okay. So I haven't heard of that, but yeah, so the near infrared, which are you can see the red glow on them. So I guess, yeah, if ecclesiastical have raised a concern about this. Yes. It is important. Yeah, it is important to consider that. It is a very important consideration, but that's why, they're quite well spread out. We haven't got anything in front of them. You do need to consider that. But as long as it's well designed and well installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions, then you'll be absolutely fine. So the next step then, we decided on infrared because it was going to be the cheapest system to run. We did do a cost comparison. Our budget was something along the lines of, for an air source heat pump, we were looking about 80 to 90,000, and we didn't think that we were going to, improve the performance of the heating. Whereas infrared, our budget was around about 50,000. And that was including the installation of a new three-phase power supply, which is needed for the increased energy demand. So we carried out the design. What we did first was did a survey of the building. We didn't have any drawings, so we did a survey, produced the plans of the drawings, and we then carried out heat loss calculations. And you can do that in a number of ways. We did it using SIBSE methods. You can do a rough calculation just on watts per metre squared. And yeah, probably roughly, if you were to estimate it around about 100, 150 watts per metre squared, that's probably the sort of energy use you would find in a church. But it all depends on what type of building it is, if there's any insulation, what type of walls, what type of windows, how tall the building is, what the construction of the roof is. You do need to consider all of that. And there are calculation methods that does take all of that into account. So depending on how much heat gets lost through the fabric of the building, through the windows, through the roof, the fundamental of heating design is you need to put as much energy in as what you're going to be losing. Infrared is slightly different because you don't need to consider so much heating the whole space. However, from a design perspective, it's always good to design a heating system so that it will heat the whole space. And if you've got more than you need, it will just turn off quicker. So from our point of view, I think it's around about 50 kilowatts that we calculated the heat loss would be. So we've got about 50 kilowatts of heating in here. The high level heaters are 2.4 kilowatts each. The lower level ones are 1.8. And there's about 30 of them. If you could potentially get away with fewer heaters and still feel that effect, but by having as many as we have and by matching the heat loss, we are feeling that this is a warm space. So I would recommend doing that. The only time that you might consider putting in less heaters than the heat loss would require is if you've got problems with getting the power supply that you would need. So if you can't get a three-phase power supply, infrared heaters may still be effective because they're heating the people, heating objects, but you won't necessarily heat that whole space. So we did a three-phase power supply application as part of this. The total cost for that was fairly reasonable for us. It was about 8,500. They dug up the road, did a connection out there. We had to trench a little bit out the front of the church, it actually went quite smoothly. Then we were looking at potential heaters. These heaters are from a company called Mirrorstone. They're an internet supplier. There are lots of options for infrared heaters. These were quite cost effective, but still a couple of £100 a piece. I think total was about 6,000 for all of the heaters. But using alternative manufacturers, we were originally looking at quotes sort of over 10,000, 15,000. So a bit of research, we found these. We've had one fail, but out of 30, I don't think that's too bad. They are on a 5-year warranty, so you would have thought that if, they must have faith in their product if they're willing to warranty it for 5 years. So we're very much hoping that was just a one-off, but the fact that we've got 30 heaters, it's not surprising that, we might find one that fails early. But they've taken it back and given us a new one. We just need to get back on the tower and install it. So overall, I think, we're quite pleased with it. They work really well. And they look, they blend in really. Certainly in this building, they look the part, I think. So the next step was how we're going to pay for this, because we'd budgeted about 50,000. But with Martin's help, Martin introduced us to various grants. We had the £3,000 from the parish buying grant, which was the hardest one to get the money out of them. But the first grant that we applied for was Marshall's charity. And that was, I heard about it through the DAC, so a little bit of inside information, but there was about 2 days left on the grant application, and they'd said no one from Guildford have applied this time, so does nobody want our money? So I quickly did a grant application in 2 days, and they came out, checked we were a real church, and then within literally weeks we had the money. 20,000 they gave us. Boiler hardship fund. So the Church of England has a boiler hardship fund. If your boiler has completely broken, you can apply for that, and they will pay the difference between what it would be to replace the existing boiler like for like and a net zero option. So say it was, I think we said to them that it was going to be about a £40,000 cost at that time, and they took off the £10,000 it would have been for an oil boiler. But we also had the Marshall's funding already, so we actually were able to fully fund this through 3 grants, and they were very easy to obtain, apart from the energy audit one, which took ages to get. But without that, we just wouldn't have been able to do this project. There were people on the PCC saying, well, we can't afford that, we're not going to do that, it's not going to happen. And I mean, I'm not one to give up. And I thought, well, with Martin saying there's grants available, with my contacts in the DAC and everywhere else, I thought this has got to be achievable. And, maybe with the power of prayer as well, we did it. And I would recommend everybody else to do the same, because often when I go and visit parishes, the number one challenge is how are we going to afford this? But there's grants available. So that's how you're going to afford it. Some parishes, they've got reserves available. They might want to, they might be able to use some of those reserves that they've already allocated to it, but they still need a bit of top up. But we fully funded this without having to dip into any of our reserves. And our reserves are pretty low at the moment. So we wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't have got those grants. So then we had to do the faculty application, DAC consultation. That's what a parish would normally have to do. I had to consult myself, so that was easy enough. We had to write. Anyone who's written a faculty would know you have to do a statement of needs if you're if you've got a church building that's grade listed. Then I think you have to do a statement of significance as well. Our architect endorsed our design, so Adam Heike was quite happy with our proposals. It's important that you get that. He did charge for coming out and visit and sign off, which is perfectly reasonable, but we have no problem paying for consultants if it's all being paid through grant funding. So we were quite happy for his services. We have to provide all the design information, do the application, which is all fairly easy online, and then the Chancellor decision was fairly quick. So we started this project out of necessity in January. We had a design together within a couple of months. We had a UK Power Networks application and quote received within a month or two as well. We had timescale thought out. We put the application in. Our plan was then to complete the work over the summer holidays. And with Michelle's help, with her organisation, we managed to achieve that. So it was quite a lot of work to do within that period, but with using temporary heating system from January to April, and then having that period and then the summer holidays to do the work, it worked very well. So the next step was the installation. So we got approval. DAC were quite happy with it because we don't have any of those difficulties with planning. Other churches might. But saying that, the DAC is they're very encouraging for net zero, because ultimately this is a Church of England requirement. We're not allowed to put new fossil fuel boilers in our church buildings. So there's got to be some compromise there. If we can't do that, we've got to do something else. So DAC is pretty supportive of net zero schemes. Obviously it does need to be sympathetic with the building, but there are lots of different options. It's just important that you consider all of the different options and those that are particularly suitable for your church building, which may be completely different to here. So we closed the church during these works. Yes? Well, we closed it for the whole of the summer, so for 6 weeks. But again, we've got a second church. We've got St Mary's up the road, so that's an advantage. That we have two. Sometimes it's a disadvantage, sometimes it's an advantage. But we have two church buildings, so we were able to use the second church building whilst this works was being carried out. We closed it for 6 weeks. It was probably the dirtiest we've ever seen this place, because it was quite a messy work, removing all of the old radiators, which exposed big holes in the walls, and then we had to make good those holes. And you wouldn't really notice now. You might see some where the skirting's not cut back in, and you might see a little outline, but it blended in quite well, really. But it was a lot of work. We had a team of electricians in who, worked very efficiently. We also employed a small builder who dug a trench for us and put the ducting in, because UK Power Networks, they're quite happy digging up the pavement, but they wouldn't dig our steps. They wouldn't do anything that was a little bit more tricky. So we had to do a little bit of building work as well. And you can see the holes in the wall there that had been created. So, when you're halfway through this project, you think, what have we done? This is a right mess. But we, by closing it and not needing to, tidy it up every time there was a service or someone wanting to use the building, it just allowed us to get it done quickly. We had a big clean. Quite a few people in the parish came, rolled their sleeves up to clean this building. We also had some contract cleaners in, and it was the cleanest it had ever been after that. So, probably, and we had Bishop Paul. Actually, we had not for this reason, but because we're also in vacancy. And so we've got visiting clergy coming to help us, and it just happened to be that Bishop Paul was down to be presiding for us on, I think it was something like the 31st of August. So that was our deadline, really, because he was booked to come here. But we did it, and it was brilliant. Everything was sparkling, and the heating was working. So 31st of August, it was still quite warm, but we made sure we put the heating on. So. But yeah, it's really good. You know, you can feel it now. I mean, we're so pleased with how warm it is. It's for us, for this building. It's, you know, it works so much better than it used to. We've got 7 heating zones, which I think I mentioned, and you can see the little Nest thermostats around. We've got sort of a zone at the back. We've got a zone at the front. Each aisle is a zone. And then we've got one in the vestry and one in the Lady Chapel. So at the moment, the Lady Chapel isn't on because we don't need it on. If we just had a small meeting at the back of the church, we probably would only need to turn the back of the church on. So because it's radiant heating, you don't need to worry about heating the whole building before that space gets hot. You will feel warm just by having the heaters in that area on. So it gives us flexibility. Reduces the energy usage then. We're not having to turn the whole building on when we've just got a small group here. And because the heat, you know, we only turned this on an hour and a half maybe before you guys turned up. And our old oil boiler, we'd put it on, you know, I don't know, the afternoon before. So 6 o'clock on a Saturday, it would go on, and it wouldn't even be at 17 or 18 by the Sunday morning. Whereas this, you know, if we forget to turn it on, or because it's the Nest controls, we have got them all on automatic controls. But you know, sometimes we might have turned it off because we're up at St Mary's or something like that. So even if we forget to turn it back on, just turn the thermostats up, and within half an hour you can feel the heat. So it's really good. So building on from that, obviously we're very pleased with our heating system. We're net zero in this building. We have Church Hall just next door, and we've got St Mary's up in Burheath. So we are looking to do similar for those buildings once we, you know, I think this is quite enough for the last year, but certainly, you know, we can look at similar solutions for those buildings. And actually St Mary's, it's an older building than this, but not that much older actually, but it's a different style. But I still think that these heaters would actually work quite well. So we may even just be able to replicate what we've done here over there. And we've already got 3-phase there, so that would work quite well. We've got Bronze Eco Church at the moment. We want to go for gold, and we will do. We will work on that. Next to the church hall, we have a woodland, small woodland, but it's actually, we've done some research on it. It's actually, you know, a very ancient woodland, and there's some indicators there that it is actually an ancient woodland. So it's hundreds and hundreds of years old. The trees there now are not hundreds years old, but it's been there a long time. And I found some maps through, there's a special website that I went to where you can find these very old maps. And it's round, there were lots of fields around here, and this was a farm at one point until they built on it in the 1930s. And that wood was called round wood. And it's always been called round wood. We knew it was called round wood. But when you look at the old maps, you can see why, because it's a big field with a round wood in it. So, but it's really interesting because that's still there. And what we want to do is you know, make that part of our mission and our you know, manage that going forward for the future. And use it potentially. We have had Forest Church there, you know, so we can, there's different things, fresh expressions that you can do and get people interested, get people involved, and maybe even, you know, we have a part of that wood, but also it's, you can see that it continues into people's back gardens. They might not even know that they've got an ancient woodland at the bottom of their garden. They might just think it's old trees, but They have, and it might be nice. That's a way that we can connect with the community by linking with that. So, continuing with the eco themes. Obviously, we're part of the Epsom Deanery Greenery Group. We're looking at potentially solar PV. Most churches are quite blessed with large roofs that are south-facing. And yes, we can put solar on this roof, but it's restricted slightly because of the dormers that we've got. But we have looked at that. We've got a quote, and if we can get a grant next year, we might do that. We don't want to pay for it ourselves. LED lighting. So, we're already net zero because we're running electricity, but we can reduce the amount of energy we're using still. We have got LEDs. The lights down the aisles are all LEDs. Most of the other areas are LEDs. The high-level ones are still halogens at the moment. But they have lasted a very long time. We've not had to change the lamps. So one will probably go tomorrow now. So we could look at fabric improvement because we've had some problems with our flat roofs. We've had leaks, but we've done some temporary repairs and it's held off. But we do need to look at replacing our flat roofs at some point in the next few years. When we do that, we could put insulation in it because there's a big void. It may only be a small part of the building that we insulate, but it all helps. And then we're just going to continue to monitor it, really. We haven't got our smart meter yet, because we've got a smart meter, but it doesn't work. So they came to replace it and didn't realise we had a three-phase supply, so that didn't work either. So at the moment, I think we've started to see some bills, and actually, don't know whether they're estimated or not, because they don't seem, we're not shocked. We're not shocked by the amount of electricity usage. So we're hoping that's true reflection of the actual usage. But it would be really good if once we get a smart meter, we can actually really monitor that. We'd like to see what it costs us for each service and for each time we use the building. So key takeaways from here really is this is really a good case study for using infrared heaters. We've transitioned from fossil fuel oil heating to a fully electric net zero system. And, and that's what the Church of England wants us all to do by 2030. 4 years left. Not sure they're going to make that, but it's good to have a target, so that because it's got everybody talking about it, hasn't it? It's got people moving towards it. I mean, there are some churches that just can't do this. I go and advise lots of churches around, and there's a church I've advised recently. They're in the middle of the countryside. Their nearest substation is, I don't know, a mile away. They've been quoted £500,000 to put a three-phase supply in, and they've got to get authority from the farm owner to run the cable in their land. So it's not really practical. So they've got an oil boiler. How are they going to heat their building? Well, they can't really do anything. So with that one, I mean, they have been able to get a faculty approved to replace their oil boiler. Obviously, the new oil boiler will be a lot more efficient than the old one. And also, part of the condition of the faculty would be that they need to pay into a carbon offsetting scheme. So effectively, they will be net zero, but they're still going to be chugging out, emissions from their oil boiler. But there's not much you can do with that, apart from having a cold church building. So, yeah. Ah, really? Okay. Was that recently? Ah. Yeah, this is the thing, because we want to do this. It's easy enough for us because, it costs us £8,000 to put a three-phase supply in. But when it's hundreds of thousands, unless you can get someone who's willing to pay for that, it does seem a lot of money for, it's got to be feasible as well, hasn't it? So we've got to be practical. But most churches, it is achievable. And actually, some church buildings have, already electric. You go into rural church buildings, and actually, from a carbon footprint point of view, if they're not using energy, if they're not using much energy, then they don't need to do a huge amount to get to net zero. Yes, Steve. Right. Really? Okay, that's interesting. So Hereford's... Yes. Makes sense, yeah. So Hereford is already net zero, more or less, then, and we've still got a way to go. Yes. Well, that's the other thing to mention, because obviously we're only net zero because we also have a renewable tariff. So our energy is being provided to us. I mean, Michelle might be able to tell me the exact name of the wind farm off of the coast of Scotland somewhere. And so we're buying that electricity, but it's all connected to the same grid. So it's net zero because we are investing in that renewable energy. But ultimately, until the whole of the electricity network is renewable, then it's almost like an offsetting scheme. But obviously, what we're not doing is we're not emitting carbon dioxide locally, and that is key, really. Yes. Well, our electricity supply, Michelle deals with that one, and I think we use is it the parish? Is it the? Go on, Michelle. Yeah. Michelle will explain that in a moment. Yes, right, okay. So yes, I mean, I think ultimately, lessons learned, actually Infra-Red works really well, is the key lesson. I mean, as I said to you before, I was really worried when everyone kept saying, oh, we want to come and see your church when you finish. And it's like, well, can we wait until it's done first, see if it works? But it does. Obviously, early engagement with DAC we would always encourage, because the DAC are there to help. And if they, by engaging with them early, they can advise what's likely to get approved, and help, and point you in the right direction to different people, point you to the grants. Obviously, with Martin and his colleagues, they're really helpful in signposting you to the, where you can, get that funding and other advice, really. And then looking ahead, we are looking at, potentially renewable energy on this building and St Mary's, and other continued upgrades, really. So that really is, everything that I wanted to say. And next, Martin had some comments. Yes?
Whilst you're still in the chair,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would very much advise to have a consultant involved rather than just the contractor, because I mean there are some contractors that are very knowledgeable and may be able to design a system, but there is a big difference between the technical knowledge of a engineering consultant and that of an installer. So we used local electricians who I knew through my own supply chain. So it's because of my own knowledge and my own expertise. I designed it, I took ownership of that, and they just installed what we'd designed. But the process is the same, whether it's me doing it or another consultant. It's designing the system so that you know that it will work theoretically, putting that onto drawings and writing a performance specification. When you've got those three documents, you've got effectively a scope of works, a set of drawings that they can install to, and the product selected, then it makes it very easy. And the ownership of the design and whether it will work is on the consultant. So I would recommend that. There are some contractors who may be able to do that in-house, but most of the time, certainly if you want to look at, if you've got those documents, you've got drawings, you've got scope of works, you've got performance specification, then you can go out to tender and ask different contractors, and get the most competitive price. Or you partner with someone that has got that technical expertise that can take you through it, but you might pay a bit more for that. So I would, in the first instance, at least have an outline design carried out by a heating engineer, and a heating and an electrical engineer, really. So there is going to be time for some questions and answers, but I'm going to invite Martin now to have some comments, I think.
Thank you, George, for your presentation, and thank you everyone for giving your Saturday morning to join us here in Nork. The first thing I wanted to say was to congratulate St Paul's on their project. Projects like this don't happen by accident. So it was the hard work of George and Michelle and the team here to kind of get this is happening, to have the vision and to implement it. I spoke to Michelle during the week and she said, it's brilliant. She said, this always used to be a cold church. You'd have to come in your jumper and with your coat. Whereas now, I was leading a service and it was beautifully warm. And again, we're witnessing that. It's a cold day outside, but here inside it's welcoming, and it's lovely. So seeing is believing. That's in a way why I wanted us to come here this morning and experience this. And it's a testimony to the good work and the benefits of net zero. In the news, sometimes we hear that there are the people who think net zero is expensive and it's going to lead to us having cold buildings, but quite the opposite. It's saving money, and our buildings are warmer and more inviting for the community that we want to invite into them. And the same, of course, would be true of LED lighting and many other things. It's lighter, it's brighter, it's much more inviting and welcoming. So why are we doing net zero? It's for those reasons. I think we're saving money on our running costs, we're inviting the community into our buildings, and at the same time we're protecting this precious planet that God has given us. When I started in the diocese 18 months ago, it felt as if all of this was somehow in the future. We were doing a lot of energy audits, we were doing a lot of planning, we were talking about infrared and heat pumps and things like that. And so just in those 18 months, suddenly some of that is now becoming a reality. Here we are looking at a fantastic infrared heating system. We've got, recently we had our diocesan conference at St John Stoke, where we were able to see their solar panels, their air conditioning in their parish centre, some work they've done on insulation, all sorts of different kind of interventions they've made to reduce their carbon footprint. In this week at St Mary of Bethany Church, the solar panels and the battery are going in. I was at St Andrew's Goldsworth Park, and next month they've got an air source heat pump and solar panels going onto their church hall. I was recently at Fetcham, where their hall, the Fetcham team are here today, and I was the solar panels are now on their hall and working really effectively to produce energy for their site. They've got plans for air conditioning in the same hall later this year, and I know they're looking carefully at the infrared heating to see whether that's going to be appropriate for their church. So it's happening all over the diocese and all over the Church of England, and we are leaders in protecting God's planet and making buildings which are suitable for our communities to use in the future. So I would encourage everyone who's here today to take what we've learned back to your churches and talk about it and put projects which are similar into reality in your contexts too. Do make links with other people who are here, because I think by learning together and being on this journey together, we have the energy and the impetus to do it. There is support from the diocese. I've really enjoyed engaging with George and Michelle, and indeed all the other churches that I've been involved with in the time I've been here. My colleague Alison, who's the diocesan environment officer, she's not here today, but she also is a great source of support. We can point you to appropriate contractors. We can point you towards sources of funding. We can point you to kind of, just some general advice on how to make a good plan. And I was actually really encouraged that George set the heating project here in that broader context of eco-church, which looks at not just our buildings, but our land and our lifestyles, and indeed the building as a whole, the lighting, the solar, and so on, really, really important. There is support from the Church of England. Steve Collins is here, and he's now Church's decarbonisation lead. There's money becoming available from the church commissioners, but it's not just church money. There's, as George said, Marshall's, Your Fund Surrey, for those churches which are in Surrey, has been very generous, particularly to our community buildings, as we move those towards net zero. So lots of support, lots of encouragement. And I think, it's real, it works, and we can do it. There is another one of these open mornings on the 21st of March. That's going to be at St. John's, Egham. They're a gold awarded eco-church, and they've got an air source heat pump, which is heating their, I think, sort of Regency era church. So it'll be really interesting to find out about their journey. And I'd encourage you, if you want to come to that, to sign up. And there'll be similarly, I'm sure, coffee and biscuits and other things to tempt us on that morning as well. That's all I think I wanted to say. I'll hand back to the team.
Yeah, just an opportunity. If you've got any questions, we'll see if we can answer them. Steve, yes. Yeah, I think you would be. So the manufacturer's recommendation was that you would get sort of 3 to 4 meters reach from the front, well, from all directions actually. So I think I took that, and I'm pretty sure I thought, well, take that, get a bit of overlap, and centre them. As it worked out, they're centred sort of roughly 3.5 meters apart, something along those lines. So I think getting a bit of overlap is quite good. But yeah, they distribute heat in all directions, and I was quite surprised because I was thinking, we have angled them down, so you are feeling the heat coming directly to you. But like the ones that are on the wall there, you will feel the heat, before you get straight in front of it. So, you do get it in, there is that distribution, and I guess it's a inverse square law. So eventually it sort of spreads out, and then when you get near the bottom, yeah, the intensity may reduce, but you still feel it. Yeah.
Well, here it's still very warm. If we come from stand here, we've got heating quite far apart here, and yet this area is very pleasant now.
Yeah. Yes. There was a question there. Yes. Yes. No, they haven't. Yeah, we were a bit disappointed because, and I guess it's little bit of you get what you pay for, because I think I mentioned they weren't hugely expensive, but they were a couple of £100 a piece. But for probably, we did shop around, and buying 30 of them, it was probably the biggest order that this company had received, because they're an internet-based company. I think they're used to sort of people buying them for their houses. But so we shopped around, but ultimately I knew that they would work, and there's no reason why you couldn't use them for this application. But they're cheaper than maybe, I don't know, there might be more robust companies out there like Herschel, but they're very, very expensive, and we did not want to pay that sort of money. I wasn't expecting one to fail that quickly, but I think it's like with any product, we've got 30 heaters here, so one's failed early, but they give a 5-year warranty. So they must have some faith in their product, otherwise, 5 years is a long time for them to guarantee that if it fails, they're going to keep replacing it. So they were very quick. We had to get up a tower and take it down, but it was easy enough. They sent us a return label, they picked it up, sent us a new one, and it's ready to go. So they will advise us what the problem was, but ultimately they've given us a new one, and we haven't had any issues with any others. So hope it is a one-off. But it may be something to consider. It's new. We've not used these in churches before, so it is trying out a new product. We're not quite sure how it's going to work because no one else has used them before. But so far, they're performing pretty well. So hopefully that is just a one-off. Okay. Yes. Well, I've been asked that before, and I can't think of anything negative. I mean, can you, Michelle? I just can't think of anything negative because... Sorry? Go on, then. Yes. Yes.
One of the factors is with climate change and the life-threatening heat waves, we thought it was valuable for a cold space if we prolong the amount of heating without having to use.
No, you can't cool this space with heaters, no. Air source heat pump, there is an advantage there that you can, air source heat pumps are effectively reverse cycle chillers, So that's exactly what they were designed as, air conditioning, to chill the space and to cool. And they can work both directions, and certainly if presumably you're talking about an air-to-air source with fan coil units, so they are designed to work both heating and cooling. I mean, my only thought on that is that by introducing cooling, you're actually introducing more energy to a building than you would normally use, but it is renewable, it is net zero, so actually any energy that you do use is, if it's from renewable source, then, does that matter? Yes. Yeah, well, this is it. Your usage and your bills might go up with that. But air-to-air is quite an effective system because ultimately you're blowing air out at the temperature that you want it. So it's quite, it's quite quick to warm. As long as it's designed to the space, then it will heat up the space quite quickly. And I think air-to-air would probably work quite well in all churches really. But it's just whether you want an air conditioning system in a historic church. It might not suit the building, but certainly a church hall is perfect for it. Yeah, but so I can't think of any negatives. Michelle can't think of any negatives. We've got some other people from this parish here. Does anyone have any negatives? Or I don't think we have. I mean, the bills. Yeah, as I say, we haven't experienced like huge bills. So we haven't got the detailed consumption information, which is a bit annoying because we wanted to review that. But just from the basis that it's not on as long, I think is it's going to be cost effective. Yes, Steve. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is a very good point. And again, it's about selecting the system that's right, not only for the building, but the usage and the occupancy. So yeah, we use this building on a Sunday for, 2-3 hours for Sunday service. And we use it for 2 toddler groups in the week, which again is 2 to 3 hours. The rest of it is unheated, it's not really used. And apart from Michelle, who has a nice cosy vestry now, but the rest of the building is off at that time. But yeah, if it's heavy usage, if the building is used every day for significant hours in that day, yeah, I would agree that probably underfloor heating would be a good option if you're combining it with air source heat pump. That would work really well. You have got to be with air source heat pumps. Ultimately, people have a perception that air source heat pumps don't work in churches, but I think that's a misconception. Ultimately, an air source heat pump it delivers heat into a building. So as long as it's designed so that there's enough heat going into the building, it will get warm. You've got radiators at 50 degrees. That's a lot warmer than the air that's inside that building. So it will heat that space. But what you've got to do is make sure the design works so the radiators are big enough, that the capacity of the air source heat pump is big enough to actually provide sufficient heat to heat that building. I think when people experience that air source heat pumps don't work very well and they don't feel warm, it's either because the convective heating system is defective anyway, because of a lot of the time it's not designed to work particularly well, or it's undersized, and it's as simple as that. But with air source heat pumps, you can get units now that work at a higher temperature. So you could take your boiler out. We had an oil boiler that was running at 70, 80 degrees water flow temperature. Air source heat pump generally works at 40 to 50 degrees. So it's a much lower temperature, which is why you would need bigger radiators to get the same amount of energy into the building. And underfloor heating is perfect because you've got a big expanse and it runs at a much lower temperature anyway. But by having a high temperature air source heat pump, they work by having a second cycle. So you take air source heat pump, takes energy out of the air into the water system, and then you've got a water source heat pump that then takes that up to the next stage. So it's like a cascaded heat pump system, and it takes the flow temperature up to 70, 80 degrees. So effectively, if you do that, you don't have to change any of your pipework, don't have to change any of your radiators, you just replace it like for like. But if the heating never really worked very well in the first place, you're not going to notice any difference. You're going to pay 80, 90,000 for a heating system that is you still got to wear your coats and all of that. So it's about making sure the design works, and I think that's where it would fall foul. And that's why it is important to have a heating engineer at least have a look at the strategy and the principles of the design, even if they don't necessarily need to design every last intricate detail, because the contractor might be able to take that over. But at least if they're selecting the plant and the equipment and the performance, then you know that it's been designed to work. Yes. I think I mean, I don't particularly have any concerns, but I think heating can disguise other problems in a building. So a lot of the time, church building might have condensation or damp problems, which if you've got convective space heating, it's disguised because you've got a constant background temperature and it's heating up the fabric and you're not noticing the damp. As soon as you take away that constant background temperature, then you're gonna see if there's issues that you didn't have before. But then again, we only used to turn the heating on when we needed it anyway. So in a way, you are giving it short bursts. But I've visited churches where, they've said they want to put heating in because it wasn't working, and before they never had any damp problems, but now they do. But when you look at the wall, it's all green and water's running down because the rainwater pipes were clogged up. So it's making sure that you've got no other issues. I mean, we have noticed that there's a bit more condensation on the windows that we didn't used to have before. Not quite sure. And I have to be honest, I think there's an area of research that would be really useful to look into that, like how do church buildings perform, in terms of their, thermal mass and condensation and all of that. So we don't really have a problem here. We've noticed one area that's got a little bit of damp patch, but that, again, probably because, the roof's leaking. And it used to have a heater in there, and it's in the storeroom, and we don't turn that heater on because it's only going to cost us money. So I hope that answers that. Yes, I've got a question here.
We've got underfloor heating in the main church.
Yes.
Some of the other areas around the outside, because vestry, for example, are very cold, and they have some ineffective wet radiators. Would we be able to use infrared heating to heat those rooms? And if so, would we need a three-phase sort of plug?
No, you wouldn't necessarily, because if you're only heating discrete areas, it's just 2.5 kilowatts. So you can plug that into a normal socket outlet. You might need to run a new electrical circuit, but you would only need to worry about upgrading your electrical supply if you were to change your whole of the heating system. The odd room here or there, it's actually that would be a good idea, because if you're only using one room, the vestry or whatever, you don't want to turn the whole heating system on anyway. You can just turn on an infrared heater and it would heat that space quite nicely. And Michelle's got one in her office vestry. Yeah.
It's probably the coldest room in the church, and I never get it with a standard radiator and then a panel convector over 18. I was the person that really got for the days to put a jumper on to come into work. It was ridiculous. He said, "Why are you wearing a jumper?" And I said, "What am I doing?"
It was cold.
Transformed our working environment. We have also worked on the working flexibly, which is another good approach to weekends again, because I work from home sometimes, so I'm not driving a car, and I'm not using an office. But when I'm here a fair bit, especially next week when I'm very much with things, it's changed my working environment. Written off a massive hoodie or like a night hoodie on the back of my chair, which I used to have to wear in the winter and sometimes in the summer. It's very cold room. When we had a huge heat wave last year, it wasn't that hot in my room, so really were excellent for school plans.
Yeah, so you could turn the radiators off in that room. You don't necessarily need to make any other alterations and just put an infrared heater in. Yeah, worked really well. Just make sure it's high enough so that you don't want to be touching it. You don't want to be accidentally touching it, or as long as it's out of the way. Yeah. Yes. It is.
So can you run it continuously for hours on your electrics? That's the question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you've got sensible electrics, you don't want to do that.
No, I mean a normal 13 amp socket outlet is capable of taking 3 kilowatts. So, I mean, you do need to consider that, because if you just plug one in, probably be fine. But if you know, you've got to look at how many are on that circuit. So with these heaters, we obviously ran in new circuits for all of the heaters. But there's no reason why you can't add the odd 1 or 2 heaters onto existing circuits. But that's where the electrician would have to advise on that. Yeah. So, but yeah, more than possible. Yes, Paul.
You mentioned doing solar power in the future.
Yes.
I believe so. However, in a building like this, virtually all the energy used to the same when there's not a lot of solar energy left on the roof. Just something visual.
Yeah.
Would you not be best to live a real battery charge at night?
Yeah. I mean, some people do that. You can charge a battery at night, make use of the off-peak electricity, it's a bit cheaper, and then use it during the day. But you can do the same with PV, you know, photovoltaics. You can charge a battery up and then use it, release it sort of when you need it. But ultimately, yeah, you are right. It's sort of a little bit mismatched, because when you need energy the most is when solar PV is gonna be the lowest generation. But PV panels are getting more and more efficient, and even, you know, they work a lot better when shaded now than they used to. So you still get a lot of you will still get quite a bit of energy out of a solar panel during the winter. Yeah. Well, I think it depends. Ultimately, it depends on meter squared, you know, because you've got to look at the kilowatt peak that you're going to actually get out of it at certain times. So, yeah, we are restricted a bit because of these dormers. So that will restrict us. But say St Mary's, I mean, we would be able to cover that roof in PV, and that would really save some money, you know. So you can use the energy that you generate either directly on site or put it into battery storage and use it when you need it, or you can sell it back to the grid. Feed-in tariffs aren't as good as they used to be, but you can get paid for generating electricity. So it's a win-win, really. I mean, there's a payback, isn't there? So if we were to pay for this ourselves, I don't know, it might take 5-10 years maybe to get our money back. But yeah, so 7 or 8 years payback, which is about right. But if we were to get a grant, then it's all free money, isn't it? So, yeah. Yes.
Thinking about the design system that works in Nork, the other side of the
Yes.
It struck me that speaking to equipment manufacturers to come in with the church and say what they recommend, their recommendation is based on what they want to sell.
Oh, it can be, yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder whether that's actually a sensible starting point.
Yeah, you do have to be careful with manufacturers because they will be trying to sell their wares. However, you know, there are certain ones that if you've got more of a historic church, and I think you're Cuddington, aren't you? Yeah, you're looking at potentially the halo heaters, and those manufacturers, they will come out, do a survey, and may even give you like a heat map to show you how it will work, how many you need, how many it will space, you know, how many distance between and all of that. So it is worth speaking to the manufacturers, because a lot of the time they'll come out and do that for free. There's no obligation necessarily to use them, but make sure you collate that information and maybe ask someone, you know, to review it, you know, a consulting engineer just to review, just to make sure that, you know, it is going to work and it is the most appropriate system for your building. Yes, Steve.
you are aware of what energy footprint score, if your energy footprint score is showing that your gross carbon emissions are above 10 tons a year, you, in the early summer, you are able to get into new grant schools and build a decarbonisation purchase grant scheme. And that scheme actually takes you right from the beginning of the journey. So actually, if you're wondering what is the solution, it can provide some grant aiding to be able to allow you to employ people and in fact to come in partially to say what is the best deal. So
Is that a Church of England scheme?
it hasn't been launched yet. It's been launched in Q2. The local diocesan team got the sort of basic information now.
That's because that'll be really good, because then you're getting that advice and that service, and it may be you don't necessarily need a full complete design. It's just having a consulting engineer who would advise. Yeah, beyond the audit. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, if you haven't got funds in place, it also gives you some fundraising support as well. So watch the space for this. The critical things are really, to watch. Fill in your EFT, fill it in this year. If you don't fill in your EFT, you're not eligible for it. And if it comes up at more than 10 tons gross CO2, you are that's one of the key elements.
Okay. So that may be quite helpful to people here. I mean, maybe we could share that if there's an early link to that, or maybe we can share it with everybody that's here.
Yesterday afternoon, I sent some basic parish facing
Yeah.
comms to the team. So it's just really sort of skeleton details at the moment, but more information will be coming.
Yeah.
As we get closer to the launch date, but it will probably be sometime in May.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good, because the Church of England has. I mean, they had quite a few £1 million worth of funding that they put forward, and some churches have benefited from a demonstration project funding, but I think it was only sort of like a couple of churches per diocese that have benefited from that.
It's basically been reflecting on what's been done so far, what has been made so far, where the support has the biggest impact. So demonstrate the product will let you come to the end, and you'll lessons learned from that, will flow into this new grant.
Brilliant. No. I think, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Steve. Yes. Yes.
Just to follow on to that, can you please make sure that information is very evident? Because sometimes you have to dig very deep into thousands of communications to find the things that you want to know. So to really see that information would be very helpful.
Yep. Yes. 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 No, we've only matched the heat loss. So it's about 50 kilowatts. I don't know what we got. We got 2.4 and 1.8. There's 30 of them. When you add it all up, it is about 50 something kilowatts. So I don't know if I've got that here actually, but ultimately. We based it on the temperature based on this location, Nork, which is X number of meters above sea level. So you generally will design heating systems to, I don't know, in England it's generally around about -3, -4 for a winter outdoor temperature. And internally we designed it based on an 18 degrees internal temperature. Now that's worst case, so the coldest day of the year. Now it might even get colder than that. And if it does get colder than that, it's probably a little bit undersized. But that's going to be worst case, coldest day of the year, absolute coldest. But during normal period, when we've got milder times, when we're well above zero, it's potentially oversized for that period, but it's sized for the worst case, and all it will do is heat the space quicker and turn off quicker. And because we've got all of the zones controlled, we're not going to waste electricity. We're just going to heat the people, and then it will heat the space, and then when it's got to temperature, it will turn off. It'll just take longer to do that when you're at -3, -4. It is important to match that, but the only time that you wouldn't would be where, you can't get a 3-phase supply, or your building is particularly large and even a 3-phase 100 amp supply is too small. Then you still get the benefit of having radiant heating, so you'll feel that impact, but it might not quite feel the same as what it does in here, because you're not also heating the fabric and the air. So it is important to match the heat loss. You wouldn't, if you can, you want to put as much heat in as what you would be losing, and that's the key principle for heating design, really. No, it didn't, because the thing is with that is, in a way you couldn't, because a 3-phase 100 amp supply is limited to sort of 69, 70 kilowatts. So we've got, say, 50, I think we've got more than 50 kilowatts heating, but you've got to leave a little bit of spare for lighting and power and kettles and what have you. So, you can't use all of the 70 kilowatts, otherwise you've got nothing left. It's important not to over-design, but also it's very important not to under-design, and that's where a lot of the time, like I mentioned before, heating systems, it might feel like they don't perform very well, and it's usually because they've been undersized or designed poorly. Yes? Yeah, it was 80 kilowatts. No, I mean, it was a very poor system. Heating system design, it probably wasn't designed, but the principle was just put a big old boiler in and chuck as much heat into the building as you can. But the radiators were recessed into the wall. So actually our old heating system did a very good job of heating the insides of our walls, but not a very good job of heating the space, did they? It actually wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, but, well, yeah.
I can't see you, so I'm not going to give you a clue how it was. We have big cases that look very impressive, radiator cases, but then the radiators themselves were really quite small. They were like little blocks.
Yeah, tiny little things.
And you could quite happily put your hand on there and leave it on there for 7.5 hours, and you wouldn't get, your hand wouldn't get too hot. It was warm at the best on the outside. So that's how warm a metal cover's going to get. It was really effective, and it really was that bad. I think we'll just be generous to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical of church. A lot of old church heating systems have not been designed very well, and designed in a way that, even if there is enough output, like the fact that they're embedded in a wall, that's not going to help heat the space. So I find that a lot. That, often they're just inefficient.
I'd like to give a tip, which is going to be embarrassing to George, but planning is essential. Without George's work, and he did a huge amount creating the framework of heating, and I don't think planning you can underestimate the success of the whole system. Literally plans, it literally hangs on the planning, and George really did put so much work into it. He prepared really good plans, which I could understand, because I was managing a day-to-day project here while he was off doing his day job as well. We managed it ourselves, but we couldn't do that. We didn't have this amazing groundwork.
But thanks for that, Michelle. But
But it also helped for the.
yeah, but I think.
It helped for the faculty, it helped for the grants.
Yes, but that's with me and my expertise, but it doesn't mean to say that you can't do it also. You might not have my specific technical expertise, but you can buy that. You can get a consultant in to do it, and you can do it cost effectively, even if it's a day or a couple of days of somebody's time to put a design together. It is about planning, because once you've got that plan in place and you've got a design that will work, and you've got faith in that design, and then
That's basically the most important thing, is to have that, like George said, that consultancy for a day or two, to have a really good solid plan, and that will feed into your grants, it will feed into your faculty, and it will feed into your installation, and it will give you security that you can see what's happening is what you expected. So I can't underestimate that initial stage, getting someone to, we're lucky to have a George, but getting a George to do just some proper plans that you feel comfortable with, and then it does feed into everything else, and it gives grant funders confidence in the planning as well. I think that's the key.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, it is important, and then you will know yourself, and you'll understand exactly what you're getting, and you'll have confidence yourself that it's going to work, and you'll know, what the exact cost is going to be. So it is definitely worth putting a little bit of time and effort and money into the planning stage, definitely. Yeah.
I'd say that was the key thing for us, isn't it? We had that. It just improves everything we do.
Okay. Yes.
What was the cost of removing the old system, and did you consider leaving it in place?
We did. Originally, we were going to leave it in place, but then we ended up. The budget that we put together, I think, was about 51,900 or something like that, and it ended up costing us 52,000, and we had grants for 52,000. Within that, originally, we hadn't taken into account removing the existing system, but we were able to find. We were able to source various companies who helped us with that. We had someone who took away the boiler and the oil tank. It had to be a specific environmental company. It happens that actually I knew a guy who was at Brockham Church, where I used to live, and he is a director at an environmental disposal company. So I gave him a call. He gave us a special rate for getting rid of the tank and the boiler. And he said, well, we were leaving all of the old radiator casings. But he said, whilst we're here, do you want us to just remove them? It'll only cost you an extra day's worth of labour. I was like, yeah, okay then. And then we didn't realise it was going to leave such big holes in the walls. But we had money in the grant available to pay for the making good as well. So it was. I'm glad we did it. But we had originally considered leaving it in place just to save money, but thankfully we were able to cover it. Yeah. Yeah.
Those costs that you're talking about in terms of the removal of the old boiler, you've got an oil boiler as well, the removal of the tank, those are eligible cost lines under that scheme.
Yeah.
Probably won't stretch to removing the old radiator, because certainly those two
Yeah.
are what the costs for the
Yep. Well, yeah. So if. Yeah. But yeah, it didn't actually cost us a huge amount. We using that company, it was an extra couple of days' work for them. They took it away, disposed of it environmentally, and we have a local handyman builder who, who did the making good, replastered the walls and repainted it, and again, a few days' work for him. So. I think a few £1,000s to remove all of the old and to make good. So, that's quite reasonable.
And it looks so much better. Martin's been there with her earlier, and he's been
I mean,
during
ours weren't worth anything. It's just a bit of old moles still, but some old churches have got big sort of cast iron radiators. It's probably quite good resale value on those.
Really good. And I don't want to look really close, as we say, you can see evidence of where they used to be. But
Yes.
it looks lovely.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
somebody was asking about parish buying, how to get onto the. Yeah.
Here you go. You have the.
Basically, from what Steve was saying and also Martin, get into everything you can in the Church of England from a buying capacity, but also from a grant capacity. Keep yourself informed, and there's a whole raft of special prices with the buying power of combined Church of England in a thing called parish buying. And we went into something that's called the Parish Energy now, Energy Basket. It had a different name, slightly different name before. Whereas we are then getting our electricity as part of, you have to apply, but there's no reason why you wouldn't get it. It runs from October to October, the start date, so you need to get it beforehand. And you get reduced rates electricity, and you do get support. Especially now, the new parish energy is really much better. And I do recommend it. Our electricity is ecotricity, if I can say it. Ecotricity. But what I've also noticed with them, that from another point of view, is that Appin is extremely reliable. Really, really good. And I do recommend them. But the parish buying is the main headline. Then you have to apply to get a parish buying membership with your details, and then you can go from there. And you can give me a call if you want me to reiterate this. I'm sure my number's somewhere. But if not, I'm on the website, definitely.
So this is one about eco-efficiency that people need to be aware of. So that all of these supply 100% renewable. What they don't do is they won't give you an export. I mean, I guess because they're 100% renewable. So if you have solar PV, for example, that you want to sell as an export, then you sort of be a little careful about selecting a supplier that will give you that option. So, I mean, I think for you guys, that's really great.
And it certainly, if you're on a journey for your awards, or bronze or gold, and we should all be caring for God's earth as well, to have the confidence that your electricity is net zero, is very confident. As George said, we can't say it's that particular windmill down the road, because we are investing into something. And also through parish energy, you can get gas as well. And we have just had our first bills from Corona, and we pay for offset gas. Because there is still gas and so is the hall, and the bills are a great deal cheaper. It's got a great big smile on my face. I do like something that saves money as well as doing the right thing. So I think that was, yeah. I'm sure Martin can send parish energy details around.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, if anyone's got any more questions, you can hang around, or we can show you around. I mean, everything is all in this space, really. We do have a lady chapel, which is a separate zoned area. You can have a look in the vestry if you like as well. Yeah, you can have a look and see how cold it is.
Or in that back room.
Yeah.
We went in there earlier and opened the door.
Yeah.
This was when we only had heating on for like half an hour, and it was like a whoosh of cold air.
Yeah. But it's nice to have you all here and to show off our system. And yeah, thank you, Martin, for organising it. So yeah. Okay.